Hello, and welcome to Making Sense of It. This program is our gift to you from the Glasser Institute for Choice Theory. And our speaker today is Wendall Walker, who will be sharing with us some qualifications of a quality workshop. And so have you ever been to a workshop that you didn't think was quite so quality? Well, he's going to help us see how to turn it into being quality. So Wendall, we're ready when you are. Take it away.
You said there would be a round of applause. Oh, there it is. There it is. Okay, all right. Thank you. I wonder who the originator of the round of applause was too. That person ought to get credit because we all use it too. Well, I like Mona. I didn't say this to her, but Mona is so savvy about these things. She knew some of the components. Once you put out a list, you know, the 10 things so-and-so, somebody will come up with number 11. And so I got the idea to say some components too. I say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of us that have tuned in, if any one of us said, listen, let's brainstorm and write down your ideas about when you go to training you've been to that was really good, that was so-so, that was not good. Let's brainstorm and develop a list of components that make a training session a quality event. Well, we would come up with this list that I've got, or most of them, you know, too. So we all have this in our head. Sometimes I find it helpful if I get an affirmation for what I already know from a workshop, and if I can get several additional things added in, then that's a bonus too. A lot of times people don't want to go to a workshop where they say, well, I already know all that stuff, you know, too. But sometimes I know it, but I've forgotten it. I haven't used it or thought about it in some while too. As a start off, since we're choice theory based, the bottom line would be, is the workshop need satisfying to people? Love and belonging, connection, some power, some information, some feeling more competent, feeling more empowered. Is there some fun going on? And do people have choices and freedom, or will the information of the workshop add to their choices? And we're mostly not concerned in a workshop with survival unless something happened and that we had to scramble around too. Also, I use the term workshop, and I was thinking about this: training session, presentation, speech. You know, we have 4-day training things. We have 2-hour training things. You have speaker who's a keynote speaker. So I'd like to kind of substitute all of those in for the word workshop. My list came from doing this activity at the beginning of a number of quote workshops or trainings where I asked people up front, and I captured them, and I took those flip chart pages home and then put them all together in one list. I'm going to start here. Let's look at the handout, Mona.
All righty.
Okay. Also, every so often, someone will give a handout at a training thing or an event with really good stuff on it, and their name is not on there. And I'll turn around and put their name on there so that if I can share it with somebody else too. So I'll always encourage people to put their names on a handout. And then also some of my stuff is almost verbatim from Glasser, and I acknowledge that. Some of it is my own initiative, putting things together. Well, I think it's legitimate to get credit. To start off with, certainly a training session, you want clear objectives and content. And that might be printed in a brochure, or it might be just stated up front. Today, what I hope to do in this workshop is cover a number of components of a quality workshop. So tell people ahead of time. And then, of course, if it's printed or brochure or informed in some way, people can decide if it's something they want to come to or not. So, but there is a thing, if there are CEUs, continuing education units, available, then the people that run those are very specific about the stated objectives. You've got to have them in a certain way because they've got to meet the criteria for legitimate kind of training too. Certainly useful information has got to be there. And I want to tie some of these ideas to the Glasser concepts. So Glasser would say useful information as opposed to schooling, which he talks about in quality school stuff. Content relevant to participants. Well, there's a couple of things. Either you say up front what the content is and people screen themselves, or you try to, one of the things a lot of trainers do, they say, I will tailor this training to your scenario. Mona's done a lot of training in the corrections prison environment, and it would be maybe a little different examples and terminology than if you were doing it somewhere else too. So it's certainly going to be relevant to people. Coming across to the right on that handout, an interesting startup and overview is important. I try to do a little humor. And Mona introduces me and I said, you said it was going to be a round of applause. Well, usually in a group of 15 or 20 people, enough people will applaud. And so already we've got an informal kind of a fun startup there. Another way to do that is have music up front playing, and that kind of starts to set the mood. A visual aid or other visual aids, a chart or something like that. You could start off with some kind of a challenging or startling statement just to get the attention of people. You don't want it to be offensive, but thought-provoking, and that could be. Coming back to the left, participant involvement and interaction. A lot of these ideas on this page will depend on the length of the training session, obviously. If I've been contracted to come in and do a keynote speech, there's not question and answer all through the speech. We don't do small group breakouts or what have you. I'm in there and then I'm out, so to speak. But if you can involve participants and have some interaction, that's good. Sometimes in a large group, people say, let's get a show of hands. How many of you have ever blah, blah, blah? And people raise their hands. And so it's a little chance for involvement and maybe some very interesting information, overwhelmingly this way or split 50-50 too. Handouts and take-home materials are helpful. One of the challenges there, I guess at one time, I used to give out a set of handouts for training, and they were on the person's desk or table when they came in. The problem with that, you start looking through all the interesting materials and reading them when you're not focusing on any one particular, all of them at one time. And so then I started giving the handouts to people as we would address the next topic. But the take home gives people a chance to revisit the subject matter. A multi-sensory approach having to do with, of course, seeing, and I don't know what you would do if you wanted to enhance their olfactory, if you would spray scent in the room or not, but there might be music, listening, seeing, movement around, that sort of thing. If I can involve the multi-sensory that is appropriate and relevant, that's always helpful too. Coming over to the right, meaningful activities and exercises. They've got to be, I've got to be able to do an activity, either set up ahead of time what it's about, or afterwards make sense of it in light of the subject that we're talking about too. So that makes sense. I don't want to do something here that's just fun and then it has no connection to anything too. There's certainly, to me, and seems like to an awful lot of people, that it's very helpful if the presenting person, the host, the facilitator has got some energy and enthusiasm. about the subject and about the training event that day. I don't know if you've ever seen Zig Ziglar, the former numero uno person on sales. He had so much charisma and movement and humorous stories and stuff like that. And it was just interesting to watch him. You know, it kept my interest the whole time. Now, if I can be over enthusiastic and look like I'm trying to cram stuff down people's throat. I don't think people like that particularly or enjoy that. It's hard if somebody, I took an insurance class in a business program one time, and the person knew everything in the world about insurance, but had no interesting presentation style. So you had to really, I knew I needed the material for the test, so I paid attention, but it was not fun at all. Audio visual aids, we decide if you've got slides, if you've got a short movie clip, if you've got other things to present, we decide on that. Sometimes you can put them up, and if I'm not talking about those, then I'm in conflict what I'm saying with what's in the background. Coming over to the left, humor enjoyment. A lot of these sort of overlap with each other. It's nice to have some lighthearted moments in a training workshop, and sometimes they would more or less. Sometimes the subjects don't lend themselves to any kind of humor, and it's interesting. I'm fairly good at this. Every so often I drop the ball. I say something that was a little insensitive or unthinking. But one of the things that I like is that having a good knowledge of choice theory, one of my organized behaviors is to turn around and apologize to you. Listen, I think in my attempt to be humorous and kind of energizing in the thing, I think I may have stepped over the bounds there, and I apologize for any offense there. And then I can, further down here, I can show that as a learning piece for me. I'm going to make a note not to do that again, you know. And so thank you for that feedback. Humor is your chance to practice new skills. That we'd only be practicing new skills if it was a longer workshop. And I keep wanting to call them our basic intensive weeks, but they're, I guess, just basic and advanced training in CTRT. Those are meant for people not only to get knowledge, but skills. And so we absolutely want people to have the chance to practice in a safe psychological environment. Connecting and networking is a big thing, a big plus in workshops and training. Sometimes people, they do a lot of it on the break. They'll seek other people out, introduce themselves. If you've got enough time and the group is not that large, sometimes I like to do it. Let's go around, and if you take 1 minute and just tell us who you are, where you live, where you work, what you do, a couple of things there. People start to see others that they have something in common with, and then they seek them out. And so we're helping to facilitate relationships, connecting relationships, and networking. There are networking groups you see in the paper all the time. Networking groups, people just, and you go with 100 business cards to give out too. If the workshop and training has got some choices and options, that's helpful to people, meeting the need for freedom and that sort of thing. Coming down to that, if there's a chance for people to get a sense of feeling important, that helps them satisfy their need for power. That's easily done. I can say, well, Jim, Jim, repeat that thing you said a while ago, because that was very helpful to me. So Jim repeats it. Jim gets a little bit of prominence in the workshop. He gets recognized. You try to recognize the input of anybody at all that says anything, and by name. And so people, and I'm not the only one that knows something about the subject. other people do too. Maybe a comfortable physical setting is important. Sometimes the chairs are terrible, or the arrangement of furniture, or the air conditioning, or the lighting, or something like that. So if I have some say so over that, then I try to make that more accommodating. Sometimes I've made changes in the middle of a workshop because people just said, "Hey, this is not working." It's interesting too about a training thing. I just thought of this. I would sometimes bring large 5x7 or larger cards and ask people to make a name card. So it's sit a little name card tent. And if there's only 8 or 10 people, everyday people would come in and sit in the same place. Every so often I would experiment with putting the name cards in a different place in the room, and people come in and look around. And sometimes that was irritating to them, and sometimes it was okay. If you did it several times, that I would do. Certainly, if the training is organized and structured, that helps to have my own game plan. Sometimes I would write down an agenda on a chalkboard or a whiteboard. One of the things about, and I'll say this later, if I write down that this is what I'm going to do, I better do it. Hey, well, the workshop was pretty good, but he didn't cover all the material. So if I'd written down 10 things I'm going to cover and only covered 8, then I've got a gap. So just maybe the thing to do would be to write down 8 items you're going to cover. If you cover them and you got time, you cover 2 more. Wow, he gave us bonus items. So it's kind of an interesting thing there. Participants' wants considered. I don't have time for that if I'm just coming in and doing an hour presentation on something. If it's a longer workshop, then a good thing to start with. What were you hoping to get from this workshop? Let's go around. Well, I was hoping to learn more about Glasser's evolution from reality therapy to control theory to choice theory. And then if people say what they want, I can acknowledge I'm going to cover that, or that's not going to be part of this workshop. I don't know that I'll have time for that. Let me put that over here. If people, if they express a want and we don't address it, then they feel kind of left out too. One of my areas of importance and experience and a good bit of expertise is being multiculturally sensitive. I've particularly found myself for a number of years now, when I do role plays or give an example, I'm using names that are related to different cultural ethnic groups. I can say, well, here's Ronaldo here, and he's talking to Hildegard, la la la, you know, some Italian names, French names, straight, you know, Caucasian names, those sorts of things, but a variety of names and scenarios too. And I think that shows respect for, and it just keeps me thinking different ways, you know, too. Some flexibility. You need some organization and following it too. There may be a requirement to change gears, to add something else in, to take something out, that sort of thing. A lot of times on refreshments, it's nice if you're going somewhere, maybe they've got refreshments that they're providing. Maybe there are places for people to, you know, there's a break room and vending machines. So you give information about that. I used to do some training in Alabama with educators and their mantra was, if we don't eat, we don't meet. And so every single thing, there was at least cookies and coffee or iced tea or something like that too. If we don't eat, we don't meet. I can just see them folding their hands up. Forget about it, you know, forget about it. Obviously in concert with Glasserian choice theory ideas, a respectful, non-coercive atmosphere too. And people can tell that by the tone of your voice and your and when people say some things, the participants say things that are particularly different or far out, not being blown away or not frowning up my face with it too. I think I've shared with some of you on a couple of these programs before. My wife has a wonderful expression. She says, "Isn't that interesting?" You know, instead of saying, "Where the hell did you learn that?" Isn't that interesting too, you know? Coming back over to the left, if the workshop is going to have techniques in it, then I think the instructor demonstrating the techniques. Glasser always did that. I sponsored him 4 or 5 times in one-day programs, University of Tennessee at Knoxville, Georgia State in Atlanta, over in Augusta, Georgia, some places like that. And he always talked, I don't want to say lectured, talked in the morning about choice theory and reality therapy, and then would always do a demonstration in the afternoon asking somebody. So that's an important thing to do. If you're saying this theory and this approach offers very good techniques, then you ought to be willing to show them too. Sharing and learning from each other. You say up front, listen, I either invite your comments or I don't invite them, but depending on the time that I've got too. But I say, we can learn a lot from each other. I bring in a certain amount of experience and expertise, but collectively we've got, you know, a mega experience here. So if you've got something to share, we'd like to have it because we can all benefit from that. And certainly the trainer, the presenter, the facilitator actively listens to people when they're talking, and people inevitably appreciate that. And then you turn around later on, 15 minutes later, and you say, well, this reminds me of something that Alice Levy said earlier about, you know, these things here. The other day, Alice was talking a lot about the Holocaust and things with Jews. And so I show that I've been listening to people, and I turn around and I tie it in with something else. And again, that's multi-beneficial. People feel validated, they feel important, they feel respected, and that sort of thing too. So here's another one, instructor open to learning. Some of these overlap with each other. I've made notes sometimes to say, and I'd go and write it right on the flip chart that I had pre-prepared. And I say, well, that's important. I'm going to add that in next time. I didn't even think to include that before, but I'm going to add in before and give you credit, Jim, on that too. One of the components of quality coming from W. Edwards Deming was that people get more than they expect. What's the saying, you know, don't promise more than you can deliver, or promise less and deliver more. It's kind of a thing. A time discipline is certainly good. Mona's a premier person. She starts on time, she watches the time, she ends it. People can expect that. Listen, come and sit in for 20 minutes, and if you want to leave, then okay, you do that, and people know when it's going to be. Continual improvement mentality, that's a Deming thing. Element of quality is always continuous improvement. When I would talk about these ideas in the workshops or training, I'd say to people, what's an example of a high quality automobile? Well, back a number of years back, quite often people would say Lexus. They won the J.D. Powers award for blah, 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 you see. And so I say, well, if they've got the #1 car, what do they do next year? Do they make the same car next year? And the people say, oh no. What do you mean? Well, they make changes. Well, if you have the number one car, why would you make changes? And then that, facilitates a discussion about, well, meantime, all the other automobile companies have got a Lexus in their plant, taking it apart, stealing the ideas to see if they can make the same thing better for the same money, or make it as good as for less money. And so that's the thing in a free enterprise system. The competition invites people to come in with new ideas and new products, and better service, better prices, what have you. And so we can't say stay on top or at a quality level without continuous improvement. A question and answer opportunity, again, depends on the time. Sometimes people say, if you would hold your questions to the end, they would be important. I've allowed time for that, but I would like to kind of get my flow, my mojo going here, in the flow of my presentation. There may not be a time for a question and opportunity. Sometimes speakers stay afterwards and people catch them and ask them questions there. But you either decide there's going to be or there's not going to be, and in what way you want to do it. Let me come back to a good summary and closure. I'm going to go over the variety of approaches and pacing. And actually, we've been talking about that. Sometimes you maybe play a video, sometimes sometimes I'm standing, sometimes I may sit in a chair if it's a small group. Sometimes I'll purposely say, I'm going to slow down a little bit. I get enthusiastic about these things and I get to running fast, and I think I'm going to slow down a little bit. Just saying it is an interesting thing. A friendly, trusting environment. Okay. All these things we've been talking about help to develop that. Can they trust what you're saying? Can they be trusted that what they say will be attributed to them and whatever? There may be an opportunity for specific feedback, evaluation of a training or not. It's not always asked for. If people are paying money or getting CEUs, quite often I think there would be. One of the tricky parts too is like in our 4-day workshop trainings that we used to do, is allowing time for people. You could say, take this evaluation with you and complete it at home and send it in. The return rate on that may be, just partial. Then the other way is to give people time in the training at the end to write feedback and turn it over anonymously. Give everything to Sharon. She'll give me, put them in an envelope. Don't put your name on them, that sort of thing, whatever, But whether you ask for feedback or not depends on the setting too. Let me come over here to good summary and closure. A nice model of, I think this came from speech class or college speech class. One model is the 3 tell-ems. Tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you told them. So if you were doing a 15-minute speech presentation in a speech class, you might take 1 minute to say, today I'm going to talk to you about techniques for trying to persuade people, blah, 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 or for baking, tips on having your baking goods turn out well, whatever it is. That's what I'm going to do, blah, blah. And I'm going to cover 4 or 5 of the tips that I know. And then you go proceed to cover the things you said you're going to. And then you say, all right, by way of wrapping up, what I was hoping to do today is cover some of the basic tips of blah, blah, blah. And then that. And it brings nice closure to people in that way. And so to that extent now, and let me just start where let me finish it where I started, that a quality workshop, if you notice the date on this, 1097 at the bottom of that handout, that's when I developed that. That was in the heyday of Glass doing quality school stuff. and lead management, which was quality. So I started off today by saying a workshop would likely be considered quality, whether people knew it or not, if it somehow or another, to some extent, satisfied the basic needs of love and belonging or connectedness and fun, humor, lightheartedness, freedom, choices, and options. And if they leave with more information, feeling more important, more empowered than when they came. So those are some components of a quality workshop. Thank you very kindly.
Okay, well, thank you, Wendell, very, very much. That was great. And I don't know what's going on with the camera here, but there was some flashing on this side, but thankfully the others have stayed steady. So, and thanks for that good information. And we will close out this particular section, and those of you that are here will be open for conversation. So thank you for being here, and many blessings.